Hi students, welcome to part 2 of the mini lecture series on influencer marketing. In this particular mini lecture, we will be looking at the challenges and realities of influencer marketing. So the learning outcomes for this session, you should be able to describe why you would choose influencer marketing as a tactic, understand some of the challenges that brands face when working with influencers and undertaking influencer marketing, and also understanding the challenges that influencers face when working with brands. So overall, you should develop, by the end of this session, an understanding of the limitations and the realities of influencer marketing. So why choose influencer marketing? So the data suggests that we are actively looking for influencers and we're seeking out reviews. So searches on Google, including the word product review, have grown by 35% in the last 2 years. And YouTube videos with review in the title have also increased. So we have a total of 50,000 years worth of watch time from mobile alone in the last 2 years. So what this says to us is that people are actively seeking out information about products. So previously, we've tried to avoid advertising. If we're watching a television series or a movie and the adverts come on, it's a bathroom break or we go and make a cup of tea. Whereas now we're actually actively seeking out paid content. We're seeking out influencer generated content to help us make decisions about purchases and products. So it's a complete switch from previous reactions to advertising. So as mentioned in the previous mini lecture, when we use influencer marketing, we're leveraging their trust, we're leveraging and borrowing their credibility and the authenticity that the influencer has built with their audience. And also by using influencer marketing, we're accessing a very niche, a very specific and a very targeted and a very engaged audience that the influencer has nurtured. And overall, using influencer marketing helps us to circumnavigate those challenges that are posed through traditional digital marketing like banner blindness or ad fraud or the interruptive, annoying nature of interstitial adverts. So it all sounds so good. Why aren't all brands doing it? Well, it's actually quite challenging to do influencer marketing very well. So because it's fairly new, a lot of companies and brands lack a clear strategy. They don't know how to go about planning, implementing, measuring and improving the influencer marketing as a tactic. So they lack a strategy. Influencer marketing is a fairly new phenomenon, so it's still a bit of a lawless Wild West. So brands don't know what to ask for, what they should be getting, what they should be paying. So it's very unknown. It's a bit of a kind of a new frontier. There are also changing laws and new regulation around ethics and disclosure. Some companies have got into big trouble for not disclosing when they've paid influencers and the influencers' content has looked like an authentic, unpaid review. So this is something companies have to think about. And there's also a challenge with sort of the creative concept. Does the brand come up with the creative or does the brand leave it to the influencer? So who dictates the creative process? So many companies that have been doing advertising and coming up with creative content for a long time will find it challenging to relinquish that and to hand that over to an influencer. There are many other challenges for brands when working for influencers, and one of those is a lack of control. So due to the nature of influencer marketing, you are relying upon the influencer's enthusiasm. But if they're lacking in enthusiasm or they're not taking care, this is going to impact your campaign and it could impact your customers' consideration of your brand, how the esteem in which they hold your brand. So it can be very, very successful, but it can also be very damaging because you don't control the influencer's interpretation and expression of your brand. One of the other challenges that brands face is a lack of understanding of the process, how to go about choosing the right influencer for their brand. So many companies will just look at the most glaringly obvious metric, the number of followers. So they'll start to chase influencers that have a large audience and they won't necessarily look at the relationship that that influencer has with their audience. So ideally you'd want to find an influencer that has a very deep connection or very authentic connection and has a very engaged and responsive audience rather than an influencer that just has a huge following and with lots of people that perhaps don't really engage very often or very deeply with them. Some of the other challenges that brands face when working with influencers is that some influencers may start out fairly sort of authentic, but there might come a point when they want to increase their income that they will work with anybody, so any brand. And if your brand, perhaps say your brand is family friendly or child friendly, and your influencer goes and works for an alcohol, cigarette, or other adult type industry or brand, that could have a knock-on effect. Or if that particular influencer is seen in the press or the media doing something very bad or something very unethical, again, that can reflect back on all of the brands that influencer works with. So again, it's sort of having no control over your influencer or ceding control to your influencer. So when brands get it wrong and brands do pair up with an influencer that perhaps isn't deeply linked to their product or their industry, audiences can sniff it out as being disingenuous or inauthentic, and then the brand loses that the credibility, and they're not really leveraging that trust. It all kind of falls flat. They're trying to do something and it's failing because there isn't a deep connection. So brands, again, will often quite chase influencers that have a big following, a large audience, and are popular and well known. And those first choice influencers are quite often booked well in advance, especially around key industry and busy periods. So not knowing where to find influencers or how to sort of connect with them in good time to secure a contract with them can be quite challenging for brands. So this is quite often why brands will use an influencer agency or consider that, or not know whether they should use an agency or should they contact direct. So those are some of the challenges faced by brands when working with influencers. So now let's look at some of the challenges for influencers when they're trying to work with brands. So Tobin, citing a TAP influence, so this is a nice site that's specifically about influencer marketing. So Tobin citing a survey of 795 influencers. So that's a good number of influencers to get a good feeling about some of the biggest challenges that they face. So influencers are telling Tobin that some of the biggest challenges that they face are brands constantly increasing their demands. So this is something we call in the industry scope creep. So you make an agreement, for this amount of money, you will deliver this, this, and this. So the brand pays you and then say, oh, by the way, could you also do this and maybe this as well? So they constantly increase their demands, but not necessarily increasing their payment or sticking to the original agreement. Another challenge that influencers face when working with brands is that the brand, as mentioned earlier, can be a little bit controlling. It can have difficulty letting go of sort of what they think is best. So they try to control the influencer's content. Now that's going to be problematic for the influencer because they've built their trust on being authentic, having a consistent tone and style and a way of doing things, maybe a certain level of honesty. So if the brand is trying to control their message, it's going to stop them from doing what they do well. Another challenge that influencers cite is a lack of a proper brief from brands. So briefs should provide a really clean outline of the do's and don'ts, but also give the influencer scope for creativity. So if the brand knows there's something that is really off-brand for them, or some things they don't talk about like politics, or that they're very much about diversity, then this must be communicated to the influencer so they at least know what they should and shouldn't say, but also have that room for creativity. So 85% of influencers said that needing to understand product benefits and why a product and service is relevant to their audience is important before they accept the assignment. So if they're given a product from a brand and they don't really understand, like, why is this product great? Why would people want to buy it? Why is it better than other products? Or why is your service better than other service providers? So it's really, really important for brands to communicate what makes their product special, why it's really good for their audience, or why they should have confidence in recommending it to their followers. 53% cited low compensation as the biggest challenge. So many people who are trying to establish themselves as an influencer, making it their main income, struggle to kind of argue their value to brands and charge what they think they're duly worth in terms of all the effort, the 8 hours a day of filming, planning, the equipment that they've bought, the sort of the consistency that they have to create with their sort of content schedules. Sometimes brands can think, oh, you're a person, you're not a magazine or an advert or what have you. So why should I pay so much? You know, it's just, you know, a little conversation that you're having with your customers. They don't appreciate the time, the energy and the effort that the influencer has got put into growing their audience and sort of creating their profession. So 90% of influencers also said that they're not willing to work for free and they're not willing to work in exchange for products or exposure. So some big brands will contact an influencer and say, work with us because it will be good for your profile, and they expect them to do that for free. So this is some of the challenges that influencers have when working with brands, is sort of setting a fair and reasonable fee and making sure that the brand agrees and sticks to what's agreed in terms of what they're going to deliver. So a little example of an influencer who got a big fat no when she was trying to work with a brand. So obviously brands can approach influencers, but influencers can sometimes approach brands or service providers or product providers. So this is an influencer who contacted a luxury hotel in Dublin, and she wrote to them requesting that she and her boyfriend could enjoy a 5-day stay in their hotel completely free of charge. She said she would do this in exchange for promoting the hotel on her channels, boasting that she had 87,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel and 76,000 followers on her Instagram. So the hotel clapped back online on social media, generally kind of asking her how she expected them to be able to pay the chambermaids that cleaned the room with free exposure, how she expected them to be able to pay the concierge, the cooks, the cleaners, everybody else that, you know, is putting in hard work and getting paid cash, you know, real money in return. So it was quite a clapback. And the influencer was very upset, so she's posted subsequent videos about how upset she is, and then the hotel's come back and has pretty much banned all influencers from staying at the hotel. So things can get a little bit heated, things can get a little bit nasty. So it's part of the risk of putting yourself out there, I guess, as an influencer, if again you are asking for things for free in return for your exposure. And likewise, influencers have the same problem when brands say, well, you can work for us for free in exchange or to receive the benefit of being associated with us. So it's a very difficult industry to navigate in terms of who should be paying what and what's fair and what's reasonable. So a summary of the challenges with influencer marketing. So one of the big challenges that brands face is finding the right influencer. Another challenge that brands face is devising an offer that is attractive and fair to the influencer. So what should they offer? How much should they pay? How much should they expect in content and exposure in return? Another challenge is devising a method to track the influencer's efforts and make sure that they're compensated in the right way. So if an influencer promises a certain amount of time on YouTube or a certain number of mentions or a certain number of blog posts, kind of monitoring that and making sure they're of a good quality, they're scheduled on time, and that they are, as agreed. It's also very challenging to craft a compensation contract and agreement. Again, this is new for many brands, so they don't know where to begin with creating a contract and creating a creative brief. It's also very difficult for brands to know what they should expect, what should happen, what sort of return on investment should they get. If they pay £1,000 or £2,000 to an influencer, what should they expect? Should they measure it in web traffic? Should they measure it directly in how many new donations or how many new sales they get? So it's very difficult predicting what sort of return on effort should be expected for working with an influencer. Brands should also be able to craft a creative brief, so they should be able to put together resources like the logo, all the different hex colors that the brand uses on their digital media, whether it's slogans, whether it's about us. They need to provide the influencer with all of the creative content, the do's and don'ts, the what we expect, so the influencer can use that and get on with promoting the brand. So again, if this is something new for a company, it can be quite challenging. Then there's legality, so making sure that you're covered if your influencer does something to damage your brand or doesn't do the work that was in the agreement. You need to create a contract so it's legally binding because you are paying somebody for a service. So again, that's another challenge, another complication for brands when using influencers for their marketing. And then there's managing the relationship. It's again a person-to-person relationship. So keeping both parties happy, making sure that communication is clear and there's transparency and accountability and honesty is quite challenging in the real world. And again, there's that risk to reputation. If your influencer stumbles out of a nightclub drunk and does something very rude or very inappropriate, this can reflect on your brand if you're working with them. So one of the solutions that brands have is working with platforms or working with agencies, as they can help mitigate some of these challenges. So they can provide the contracts, the creative briefs, perhaps compensation, perhaps they've been working with the influencer for a long time, so they can vouch for the influencer in terms of their behavior, or make sure that that influencer only works with similar brands or brands of a similar sort of reputation and decency or suitability for family or child-friendly nature industries. So we're going to dive into working with platforms, agencies, or working directly with influencers in our next video. So finally, I would just like you to reflect on your learning from this session. Hopefully by now you can justify why you would choose influencer marketing as a tactic, but also understand some of the challenges that come with influencer marketing and some of the considerations that you need to make as a brand or an organization, and perhaps some of the challenges you'll have to overcome. Also, hopefully you'll have some empathy and understanding for influencers in terms of what they're trying to achieve in terms of their profession and what they need from brands, and overall just understand the limitations, the realities, and some of the challenges of influencer marketing. So I will see you in the next mini lecture series. Please do look at the reference list, please dive in, do some further research, use what I've delivered to you as a foundation or something to stir your curiosity so you can go off and learn more about influencer marketing. So thank you very much, I'll see you soon.